Okay, you all good? Let's do it. Hello and welcome to the B2C Lead Generation Podcast. This is episode 30 of the B2C Lead Gen Podcast. My name is Daniel Hopewell, here with co-host Simon Delaney, and today we have Robert Webster from Canton Marketing Solutions to help us answer the question, is lead gen about to have a second golden age? Welcome to the show, Robert. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, very well, thanks. Back in London and enjoying actually getting some time meeting up with the team, which has been a long time coming. So very happy today.
It's weird actually. We've charted this, like we started this podcast at the start of lockdown, or kind of in the middle of lockdown at least. So it's kind of nice to sort of see it develop, like people all at home initially, and then we start to see people get back to the office and things like that. It's nice record of all that kind of stuff. So we've got a relatively positive title today for people listening, especially if you're in lead gen. Robert, on your LinkedIn, it says, I'm just going to read this, I help companies excel in the ever-changing marketing landscape. And today we're going to talk about that changing marketing landscape throughout the pod. But just kind of introduce yourself to people listening. Could you kind of explain to people what you do and how you help people?
Yeah, thank you. So I've got just over 20 years in online marketing. Joined at the end of the dot-com crash in 2001 as chief labour. I had a long time working at kind of startups that got acquired by Yahoo and AOL. I had a long time agency side, mostly running data tech and programmatic at Mediacom for 4 years. And then more recently been sort of more entrepreneurial, first with Canton, a UK DSP, and now running Canton Marketing Solutions. And really what we're about is the recognition that online marketing is more important than ever, that it's becoming more technical than ever and a different skill set. And we're really there to sort of help advertisers and brands, publishers to get through that and to excel, right? And to unpick the difficulties and find a path forward in this ever-changing world. And recently that's been a lot of work in identity and a lot of work in sort of tech transformation and digital marketing transformation generally.
Yeah, something we experience quite a lot of as well is the sort of need for technical people in companies or any sort of company that use technical products, which everybody does now. And what happens is you can end up with like stuff just sat on a shelf is what we found. They'll just have systems and don't know how to utilize them properly, and don't know how to conjoin things together and stuff like that. I guess that's where you come in.
Yeah, exactly. And I train as a developer for my students, and I'm definitely not one now. I found it much easier working in the world of MarTech and AdTech and helping people kind of run through it. But that's absolutely it. I think there are an awful lot of very, very smart true developers out there, but often they don't understand marketing, and therefore the vagaries that exist within it, which is still at least probably half art as much as it is science. And then you've got marketers who generally as well kind of also struggle with the more advanced pieces of technology. So really where I come in is to try and and the company I have come in is to bridge that gap and help people sort of drive forward.
Perfect.
So to kick us off, the question we're talking about is the changing landscape. What I kind of want to ask is, how have the recent change in developments at people like Google, Apple, and Facebook laid the foundations for lead gen to become more important, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so lead gen's always been important, but I think it's been often perhaps unfairly playing second fiddle to other campaigns. And in a world where the cookie dominates, it's very easy to retarget someone, and very easy to kind of use their identity in a way that is often hidden from the user, right? And I'm sure everyone's had various products they've looked at following them around the web. But in a world where that identity is becoming more restricted, pretty much already so on Apple's devices, and all right, Google's delayed it for a couple of years on Chrome, but it's harder than ever to do that these days, and also less appropriate. So I think where lead gen really comes in is being that kind of glue between the brand and the consumer. It's giving that chance to show your value proposition, and giving the chance for the consumer to consent and to opt in and to opt into various forms of marketing communication in return for that value proposition. And with other forms of marketing disappearing, the real kind of where the web is kind of reorganizing itself around identity and around first-party data, that's where lead gen becomes vital. The biggest companies in the world right now are Google, Amazon, Facebook, companies that have huge amounts of first-party data. Other companies that are obviously not the same scale, but still huge companies who have that data already will do very, very well. And I'm sure you'll see a rise of people like club cards becoming more and more important again, and similar sort of schemes. But what about other companies that don't have that vast bank of data? From large FMCGs down to smaller businesses. And I think that's where lead gen really comes in. It's to sort of have that new way of communicating and getting that consent across in this kind of new privacy first era.
I think some of the challenges we've seen as well is that some companies could have been potentially sat on huge pots of data, but they've taken such a transactional approach to it that they've let it all go effectively. If they've not been able to get a sale almost immediately, they've not taken the opportunity to build a relationship. It's just been like hammer for a sale, don't get, leave it, done. And you feel like that mentality is going to have to change a bit, I guess, as well.
Yeah, hugely, because if you are going to get consent from a customer and you are going to maintain that consent over time, because remember it can be withdrawn at any point, you need to make sure that you're having a consistently good conversation. If someone does sign up for an offer and you start selling them rubbish, they will very soon unsubscribe. And I think as well that people need to think about it as much more integrated approach, because now lead gen doesn't only feed email marketing, but it feeds Facebook marketing. Facebook's really opened the doors to using lead gen data in a wider platform, and that's now spreading along faster, right? That's now really kind of spreading into obviously the world of Google and Amazon, but also the world of connected TV. Channel 4 and ITV both have programs where you can start to target an audience via consented email addresses. And again, you're absolutely right. That means that huge amount of power that it gives you comes with a real need to look after that, a real responsibility to look after that and have a good conversation. Both kind of from a legal perspective, privacy perspective, but also just from a customer satisfaction point of view. You need to think about the customer much more completely and not treat lead gen as a sort of a goal in itself. You're doing it to have that marketing conversation. And brands that do that well, I think, will increasingly be the ones that succeed in this new era.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I guess, a practical view of like how lead gen may look in the future, one thing I wanted to ask you about were chatbots, and what your thoughts on them were and how they may be used in lead gen.
Yeah, well, I think chatbots are a really great way of improving the quality of the conversation at scale. You can almost think of a search engine as being a single-purpose chatbot in a way, and we all know how huge search engines are. It's like find me the TV that you're looking for, or find me the holiday.
It's a great way of thinking about it. I've never thought of it like that, but you're right. It does, doesn't it? It just returns a single result. Yeah.
Yeah. And now what we want to do is that's the first stage of it, right? You then want to go and carry on that conversation. So it's right. We know that you want, let's say, a holiday. I think we can all do with a holiday these days, right? But it's then starting to drill into that and going, right, well, what sort of holiday do you want? Are you looking for sun? Are you looking for snow? Is it family? Do you know where in the world you want to go? How long you want to go for? All of these extra questions. And consumers want that to be a seamless part of the process. And they also want it to be value add. So they want in return for telling you what they want to be able to get better results. And I think chatbots done well can be a huge part of that, both in qualifying the lead, but also then in qualifying how you respond to that lead. And I think if someone tells you they want to go on holiday to Spain in July to a family hotel, you better make sure that your response tailors to that to again maintain that communication. So I think chatbots are a really, really important part of this, but only one part of the overall process. And people have really got to think about, again, the quality of those conversations that you want to have with your customers and how they should work over time.
Yeah, I was thinking, and Daniel and I were just talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I think I mentioned it on the podcast that I was actually on, is that you can almost see if we take chatbots almost as lead nurturing, as a service becoming a thing where, let's say you come in for a particular product like travel, it could be anything like that, switching broadband provider, and you want to ask a bunch of questions. That's going to take you through the application process to a point where it store that information, and you can either then pick it up at a later point. They can then carry it on via a different channel, or so let's say you came in for broadband and you for a chatbot and you're like, what's the quickest speed you do in my area? That it can respond. How much do you think it could cost? It can respond. And then it could almost ask you, do you want to switch now, or do you want someone to call you, or do you want us to come back at a later date or something? And yeah, the way chatbots can do that, but I think you could almost do it via WhatsApp as well. It's almost like could be a chatbot in itself, or via text, whatever the communication method is that the user wants to follow it through on. Obviously, they've had to become a lead before doing WhatsApp or SMS already.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that automated communication can continue in an environment that the consumer wants it to happen in, and I think you've got a really good point that for certain conversations, having that in WhatsApp is a great way of doing it. And you can imagine that once you've almost bought the first product, like let's say you bought the holiday, having a WhatsApp way of going, can we upgrade my room? Can we book a hire car? Could be a great way of having an automated approach that's beyond that first lead. So I think you're right. I think we shouldn't just think about it as the traditional chatbot on the page. We should think about it as how does a chatbot operate in all the different media environments that the consumer might want to have the conversation.
So we've talked there about technology and I guess in the lead gen side of it and also the nurturing side of it as well. But what role do you think technology may have in play in the way that brands buy media moving forwards?
What challenges did you say?
What role do you think the technology may have in the way brands buy media? Sorry.
Oh, right. Sorry. Well, technology is always an enabler. And what the technology does is it enables you to do quality at scale, you hope. So I think you'd almost want to imagine, if you could have your best rep talking to the client, what would they be saying? And how is it appropriate to replicate that experience at scale and faster? And the obvious danger is that the customer, when these things don't work, it's when we'll all use chatbots, be it on the phone or in Messenger, and be frustrated when it slows you down, it makes it harder to get to the point that you want to get to. And at that point, people just wish, oh, why can't I just speak to somebody? So I think that what you need to do is make the technology seamless enough that the consumer almost wants to talk to the technology, not to the person, because they're more instantly available, and they can go, you're not going to ring up, no one's going to ring up, the service hotline for anything more than, hopefully once a week, right? But you might engage with the chatbot every hour, potentially, if it was really good and it's related to whatever activity it is that you're doing. So if you can make the consumer feel like the technology is actually better than the human for that part of the technology and make it seamless, that's the role, that's the ambition I think it should play. And the role of the technology again is really to kind of add scale, but then also then go, right, we're actually helping the customer do what they want by using the technology. The ultimate example of technology from history, right, probably is like sort of like a motor car. Motor cars are great because they help people get there faster. If chatbots can help consumers make their decisions faster and book and get to where they want to be faster, then you won't see people be complaining about chatbots again.
Yeah, and I guess this is why if you listen to people like Gary Vee, has been talking for so long about voice. So the point of like an Amazon Alexa or a Google Home is effectively that is a chatbot. It's just doing it via your voice rather than you typing something. It really, the technology is different, but the sort of input and output is exactly the same. It's just responding to the information you're giving it. So I always consider that almost as like a chatbot, but just like via the voice.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a great example of actually where technology is almost better than a person, right? Because I think you feel a bit funny asking a person repeatedly to go and change your records or tell you the news or whatever. But these are things you're very happy to do with Alexa. And it's an example where you actually prefer that to the personal experience, and it becomes seamless, right? So that people actually forget that they're engaging with a chatbot or engaging with Amazon. They're just engaging with their tool.
That's right. Yeah.
So we have a lot of obviously lead generators listening to this, but we also have a lot of brands and lead buyers listening to this podcast. And what I kind of want to ask you is, what data can be applied to media buying that brands should be thinking about?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think you want to kind of go through it in order, right? Yeah, so audience data has been there in the past, and audience data is obviously tied to individuals. We'll take it as read, that's already being used. I think for me, it's amazing how few companies are applying almost old school lead gen techniques. So I'm talking about using the geolocation data and traditional sort of segmentation, by age and demographics, which you can get from a variety of different companies. It's amazing how that's kind of almost fallen by the wayside over the years, because anyone that planned the door drop campaign back in the 90s will tell you the power of using location data and overlaying that. But I think that's kind of dropped off. Taking it on a step, though, there are a number of really, really, really innovative new data providers on the market that have kind of fairly unique data sets. Data comes from social media, comes from web crawlers, comes from sort of telephone records and so on. And I think every company out there probably needs to think, right, the cookie's gone. We've got my first party data. That's great for my customers. But we need to enrich that with other relevant sources. And I think everyone out there should probably do an RFP or an RFI to go, right, who are the two or three, we can't work with every data company in the market. So who are the 2 or 3 data providers in the market that we can actually work with to really enrich that data and make it more appropriate to use to widen our net, to bring in new customers, particularly, and new leads in that lead gen point of view. And try and really understand where do their customers live, and what is going to be common about those customers that allows that company to exist. And the principles are all going to be the same as they were back 20 years ago. The difference is how it's stored and how fast it can be used. And I think that's how AI can then overlay that is the exciting part.
Yeah, I think there's a few things in that. So one is I think what people rely on now is more like Facebook audience. So they'll think, well, we'll just get all our current customers and upload them and then let Facebook do its thing and reach out to them. And it's funny you mentioned machine learning, because we have in Databall a machine learning product, and one of the biggest challenges that we face using it, so basically this is like dynamic lead scoring, right? So when a lead comes in, it gives you the probability of it converting based on all the other leads that you've had before. Like you need a certain amount, say 4,000, before it can start being accurate of conversions, that is. But the biggest problem is lack of data. So you need to enrich it with a bunch of other stuff related to the people that have become conversions, so that when new data comes in, and it's definitely that's lacking. So it got that bad that us trying to find it, we almost had to, we have ended up building our own solution for it. Not just the machine learning, actually like pulling the data in, where you go like land registry, electoral roll, all this sort of open data that anybody can grab anywhere, and then you can overlay it, and it's from that the machine learning actually starts to make sense, because there just isn't enough data attached to, it's like postcode, name, age, potentially, like some other just small amount of data isn't powerful enough. There aren't enough signals in it for you to make an accurate decision.
No, quite right. And I think as well, if you only look at the data you've already got, then you won't know what you're missing. You know what I mean? So you've got to look to other companies who have you have your first party data. You've got to think, well, what other companies also have first party data that can help me expand what I'm doing, and as you say, feed the algo in a more advanced fashion. And I think some of it's looking to the past. As I said, things like using sort of location scoring data and that whole world. Also the past in terms of if you think about classified ads on the national press, used to be huge, but companies have kind of moved away from working with the national press companies. Again, there must be a data relationship there that can be restarted, that can really kind of power them on. And then to your point about machine learning, once you've got the basics right, how do you then use more advanced techniques to then really kind of turbocharge the results and move it forward?
Yeah.
So one thing that I try and do on this show, Robert, is get advice and practical advice for people listening from experts such as yourself that they can kind of apply to their own work. So with that in mind, can I ask how you think brands and lead generators can make themselves more competitive when media buying and improve how they're doing that?
Yeah, I think there's a few different parts to this, and I think the first thing is to try and be critical and ask for outside advice. A lot of companies and people have always done things, a certain way, and if they can engage with other people in the market to go, well, look, what else do you do that's different to what we do? Now, frankly, they can be working with a company such as myself to say, look, can you review what we're doing and think of other ideas? But equally, it can just be networking, and I think networking can become a bit like a superpower. From the 20 years I've had, working in media, mostly in London, there's people out there at all kinds of different companies that know different things. And by staying in touch, you can kind of pick up and learn and always kind of refine what you're doing and drive through improvement. And I think really important is to have that culture of always trying to continually improve, continually challenging things. And you can probably tell that just recently I've been really focused on geodata, but there's a whole group of people out there who think that geodata is inaccurate and rubbish because it was 10 years ago. And what they've got to do is you've always got to challenge your assumptions because technology changes and things move forward. And I think having that culture to always be asking how to improve, and then really looking to apply that. And the last part of that is just test and learn. Anything out there that comes across as an idea, you should be looking to test it and understand whether it's going to really work. And actually, I will give you a last point to this. It's a really important point is really kind of understand the point of incrementality. So I think incrementality and attribution are probably, in my view, the biggest challenges for digital marketers. There's no perfect answer to how you look at measuring incrementality, but if you can understand it better, you'll get better results. And you'll have much more of a view of what really works rather than what Google or Facebook tell you works. So yeah.
It's what do you know with the geo stuff? What is it that's you sort of like? Is it the ability to sort of target more efficiently, or
target and measurement? Almost every company has a geo footprint. They have where they're strong and where they're weak, and often it's tied to other factors. Because obviously the street that you live on is going to have you can talk to house prices, you can understand or the number of bedrooms on the house, which obviously other companies have used for years to try and understand the demographics of an area. But once you start with geolocation, you can expand it out as to say to sort of stage of life, to income, to life stage, to just where your nearest store is, and that ties to bricks and mortar. There's a whole wealth of things that you can do with it. Number one. Number two is it also can help you tracking in the modern world because you can do A/B tests. You can go right, in simple terms, let's run this new program in these cities and not in these cities, and can we see that real world results improve in those areas or not? That based A/B test by location, I think is absolutely a really vital part of how measurement needs to work in the future. And the last reason why I like it is because it's an area people are underusing. I reckon less than 5%, probably less than 1% of companies out there have a real true geo strategy and how they apply that to online media. And yet, geodata is available in every single major platform for targeting. So if you can make that work, you've got an automatic leg up over your competition. And I suppose actually the last reason, it works. And it's no surprise that it works. As I said, people who worked back in the 90s running door drop campaigns knew it worked. And it works much, much better today. So if you bring all that together, and it's a mystery to me why more don't do it.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, in the past when we've analysed sort of some of our clients' campaigns where they've looked at leads and how they've over-indexed to sales and stuff, a lot of that just comes down to geo, and that's what you start then focusing on. Is like, it's not what you thought it was, which is, I don't know, like this salary attribute or something. It's actually, it seems, the northeast for whatever reason is where your sales are coming from, or it's over-indexing by 20%, whatever the thing is. We've seen it a lot actually. It come just down to geo.
Yeah, and I suppose another reason why it's been missed, it's great that you've seen the fact that you're pushing it, is that I think people look at data wrong, right? They're so used to having a look at how Google or Facebook tell them to look at data. And Google will tell you to believe that most sales come from brand search, right? Or most sales come from a channel at a point in time. But sales aren't about channels and points in time. They're much more about people and how people are responding to marketing. And if you take that pivot, suddenly geo comes out as one of the most important factors. Time of day, day of week, equally. Yeah, if you look at it on that way, people behave differently at different times, and that becomes vital. Yeah, because it's not a common filter in their GA report, people don't do it.
Yeah, it's probably exactly why they don't actually. There's nothing there that can just quickly go and show them. What just something I wanted to quickly ask you is because it's something I've been thinking a bit about is if there's two things within this. So if you're running display, we sort of know, you and I have talked quickly about Augustine Fu being on the show and whether, his thoughts of like the amount of fraud and things correct. There is some, but the other is lead generators or brands running lead gen tend to work only in certain channels because they're effectively trying to generate leads at the lowest CPC they particularly can be able to target people effectively. But what no one talks about is all the effectively brand awareness or display that goes on to actually drive all that activity. Because even though they're trying to get their CPCs right down, they might still have like billions of impressions of the ads. Do you think that runs the same type of brand awareness or whatever it is that brands want from programmatic display, or do you think that they should be treated entirely differently?
I think it should be treated the same. I think that the challenge is one of quality. So if by running your campaign you generate leads and you also generate what I would call quality awareness, then that's an extra goal. If all you're doing is buying cheap rubbish, frankly, and I'm a big fan of Augustine. I don't agree with everything he says. I think he overplays his hand sometimes on some things. But one thing he's right on is that there's a huge amount of bad stuff you can buy on the web. And if all you do is optimize the price, you will buy a lot of it. But if you can have a dual buying methodology where you're buying on price, of course, you have to hit the CPA targets you've been given. But also then have an overlay of quality, then you will do much better. And I think if you can then do that, then I think you have every right to then also have a look at how your brand awareness comes into play. The other part of this, I think, as well, is also looking at how you measure outputs. If you truly measure incrementality, I think what you might find is that paying a bit more and working on higher quality will work out better than if it's just on a last click, lowest price wins bid. And the other, so I think understanding the quality of the lead, understanding the lifetime value of the lead, whether how they accept it is really important. I think understanding the journey towards it and attribution is vital. I also think it's understanding competitor analysis, particularly against bigger brands. If you can grow market share, then you're in a great place. And if you can show, it doesn't matter what you're selling, but if for what you're selling, if you can grow market share, then provided you can do that affordably and hopefully with margin, then you're winning. And I think when you bring all that together, I think that the lead gen has a huge role to play beyond just the leads that it provides.
So we talked about quite a lot of things, different things there, and I guess that's a nice segue into the next question I have, which is, what should brands think about in terms of consolidating and bringing together their marketing?
I think the first thing is it's got to be consistent. Brands consumers really expect a consistent form of messaging, and there's nothing worse than seeing disparate offers in different channels. It kind of makes the consumer feel like they're being played a little bit. So I think it's got to be consistent, and you've got to kind of remove the silos. So ideally, too much of email and lead gen and that part of the market is planned separately from direct response, separately from brand. And really, that has to be part of a much more consistent overall package across the customer journey or the customer life cycle, if you like. And different teams need to be aware of how users are moving through that and the experience that they're having. And what that really means is you need to have ways of curating media that works across all the different channels and all the different partners that you work with some kind of central control, which doesn't hinder creativity, but allows you to control that experience and make sure that it is consistent and customer facing.
It's interesting because it's lead generators are used by companies to generate leads for them, but they do it under their own brand. And so it does, if the brand runs its own lead generation and they compare the two, you can virtually guarantee that they get either more conversions or, there'd be some greater positivity from it. But what I always think is interesting about it is the fact that lead generators can then grow their own brands as a result of trying to grow someone else's brand. But very few lead generators use that opportunity from the massive amount of brand awareness that we said that happens as part of it. And it comes down to this sort of transactional mindset again, where it's literally the lead is the win, not, we've got an opportunity to grow a brand here. We've got an opportunity to start a relationship with the lead. We've got an opportunity to, if you are the lead generator, upsell or cross-sell additionally and pass the lead on. It's almost like every opportunity, the opportunity is being missed by everyone in a lot of cases for B2C lead gen, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think obviously it is happening from the giants, because you could argue that the comparison sites are effectively providing that lead gen, right? Mm. And they very much do believe in the brand. There's a reason why everyone turns to go compare guy, right?
Yeah.
Or the meerkats.
That's a lead generator that effectively has become a brand.
But I think as well, you're right. I mean, the lead gens that you work with in that market much better than I do. But I think there is a real chance for them to kind of have their own brand, particularly if it's around certain areas of expertise where they kind of own the market. And if they can protect that brand, they can kind of almost double dip on how they're operating, and it could be a nice source of growth.
And it's the same for B2B, right? Because a lot of companies buy B2B leads not under their own brand. They're sort of, I don't know, aggregated in some way or come under something else. And again, the conversion rates from that are sort of minimal compared to if you actually generate your own leads. It's the same thing in B2C and B2B, but they're both concentrating on the lead, not the actual sort of relationship and the conversions.
Yeah, and I'm personally, my own company, I'm very much a believer in trying to push up the funnel when it comes to lead gen. So when I say it's a new golden age for lead gen, I really hope it's a golden age for what I might call premium quality lead gen, rather than some of the stuff that has very, very low conversion rates. It's never going to work perfectly, but you want the customer that gets the lead that comes from the lead gen to actually want to get the communication. Won't always happen, but if you can have that happen more often than not, then I think you're on the right path. And I think brands that overuse the cheaper end may struggle because it can have that negative impact on customer satisfaction. Customers are more and more aware about their data, and they're much more sensitive about it than ever, and arguably quite rightly so. So if they're getting more and more communication from companies that they don't recognise as being ones that they want to engage with, be that B2B or B2C, I think they can have a really big impact. And it's that quality lead gen piece, which is why, again, lead gen, it's a new golden age, but it needs to be done with the right technology, the right communication strategy, the right content strategy, which again comes to that sort of that integration piece.
Yeah.
There's a few interesting things there about what you said, Simon, about it being the old way of lead gen being quite transactional, and then also you were saying about building relationships, developing those relationships as we head into this kind of golden age, as we're tentatively and sort of calling it with tongue in cheek. But with that in mind, and this is a loaded question, Robert, so forgive me, do you think the email address is kind of more important than ever?
I absolutely do. I mean, yeah, if email address is obviously replacing the cookie as the main form of identity, it's the only real way that you can find consent. I think that there's huge value in it, with a caveat that it has to be an email address that the customer uses. Facebook does well because when you try and match Facebook's email address records to client records, there's a high match rate because it's their real email. All right, not necessarily for B2B, but for B2C, it's their real email. So provided you can get the email address that the customer recognizes as their business or consumer email address, it's never been more valuable and never been more important.
What something I wanted to ask you as well is the article that you had recently in the New Digital Age, which was this sort of positioning of the agency in relation to brands and their sort of workforce and how that's changing. And I guess in a way how it feeds into lead gen in some respects, but it seems to be much more technology driven. Is that something you're thinking?
Yes, absolutely. Much more technology driven. I think the role of the agency is forever changing. I think you might say that for the old school buying agency, they're almost going through an existential crisis. Yeah, they were all set up really to be places where media was traded, and you could get the lowest price. So the reason you went with some of these large agencies was, they simply had rates that were better than you could achieve. What do you think that's really been eroded now by programmatic marketing? Or programmatic, I mean, not just display, but search, social, any form of biddable media. That's much less quote unquote negotiable, which has kind of really challenged that value proposition. And the other thing is that's really changed is the planning has changed. So again, the giants would all talk about how they are amazing at planning, and they work. But I would argue they haven't fully updated their practices in many cases to handle the new world we're exploring today. Be that the programmatic world, or the world where lead gen and email, the world of identity is more important than ever. They haven't upgraded that into their planning models for the most part yet. In which case, you've got to ask, what is their value proposition? Now, I'm not saying they haven't got one, but I am saying they have to reinvent it and reinvent it very quickly. That's not the same for specialist agencies, because their value proposition is what they're specialist in. And they remain excellent at what they do. And I think that's why it's been a great time for their growth. Combine all of that with a huge challenge in talent. The change in how an agency operates means that you less need the manager, the negotiator, the operations person. What you need is the transactional buyer and potentially the technologist and the analyst. It's led to a much flatter structure than the kind of the pyramid of old, but it's also led to a real shortage in talent for those kind of positions. Because quite simply, there are far more roles available than there are people out there that do that. And that really kind of, I think, changes the game as to how brands utilize agencies and what their value prop is and how that should work out. And it's a fascinating space to watch and to navigate and to try and be a part of.
Yeah. Do you think they'll ultimately end up becoming just sort of creative companies that build, advertising campaigns from a design level? Or
that'll be if that were to happen, I think that would be lovely, because I think the creative is still such a hugely important part of the media campaign. And I think arguably you think we're going to the golden age of lead gen now, as we say that, arguably the last 20, 30 years have been the golden age of the buying agency, kind of led by someone Storrell with WPP setting up Group M. And I think that led to an over-importance of the buying agency and undervaluation for for creative and also for the individual, and hence lead gen. So I think there's definitely a case for creative to come back in importance, and that be the primary thing that a brand goes to an agency for, is creativity and strategy kind of combined. I think there are other areas though. So provided you keep your specialist value proposition, there will always be a space. So we've talked about the need for technology skill, the ability to navigate technology and push that through, and that's a huge part of what agencies or new read agencies, in my view, do. And specialist skills around things like lead gen and outsourcing. How do you get identity, and how do you generate a new custom? And also, and actually an area where, to be fair to the giants, they're still very strong. There's also that point about international organisation. How do you run a media campaign in 100 markets? To be fair, for the giants that need that, there are only a few companies that can really do that at true scale with what you require.
Yeah, I think something I've noticed, because they definitely with lead generation, it's definitely not been at the forefront of a lot of agencies' minds, as in big agencies. It's been I think, like you said, the identity of the individual hasn't really mattered as much as just being able to get a load of eyeballs on stuff. And so for their lead gen, what they've tended to do is just outsource it, and then have a number that they're going to deliver the client, and then the actual potential sales or the outcomes or even the relationship that's being built is just left to the wayside. And so we were talking to a guy who works at Neo Media World, which is part of what's this? It's part of Starcom, isn't it? Who mentioned that the brand that's buying leads that run through them, there's like no nurturing or relationship that's being built at all with them. And these are high value leads, potentially hundreds of pounds of things like test drives and stuff. And so you can't help but think, if brands could crack that sort of thing. This is why I think like nurturing almost as a service, or relationship building as a service with people or leads, could effectively be a really good service that could be offered, either by an agency or some other type of agency. I don't know.
No, I really agree with that, because the speed of change right now is across many walks of life, but not least in marketing, is fairly terrifying. And you can only fix so many parts of the organization at the same time. So I think having that ability to go, right, that bit of what we're doing is wrong, and the first step is to recognize the problem. How do we fix it? Is there a way that we can outsource that, and or be coached into being doing it better? I think kind of specialist nurturing coaches can come in and help do that as part of that digital transformation or digital marketing transformation journey. I definitely agree.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, Robert, thank you for joining us and talking to us, answering all of our questions. That's been, it's been amazing. I'm sure everyone listening will have learned loads, and also I think, considering everyone will be involved in lead generation, I think they'll feel very optimistic at the end of this call that we're about to head into a good new era for everyone involved in lead gen. But thank you, Robert Webster, for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's been a really great conversation, and thank you to both of you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the B2C Lead Generation podcast, the show for serious lead generators. Be sure to hit subscribe to hear more from those at the very cutting edge of the lead gen world.